Do we have music? Okay.
Hey, you're live.
Good morning. Good morning. I can't see us on big screen here. It's a little bit different, but welcome to the 20th celebration of our Women's History Month Business Summit. And one of the things that I think is so amazing about today, and I hope you're looking forward to today just as much as I am, but the theme is really centered around, and I'm going to read this, Reimagine 2021. Adapt and transcend your business. And I can't think of a better topic that we should be hitting right now at this moment as we're walking into a very different year for us. So, this entire day, as you will see, has been carefully curated for you. And so the speakers have been hand selected, the topics we've vetted, and I'm saying we really deserve credit here for everything that will take place. But really, what you should take away is a bunch of information, it's some tidbits, and also the opportunity to connect with other women that are doing the same thing that you're doing, focused on growing and scaling their business at this important time of the year. So, I can't speak enough about the amazing speakers who are joining us today. They come from a number of different diverse backgrounds. And I think what you will see is that they will speak very frankly about the issues that we are facing as women business leaders, owners, as we are growing our business. But one of the things I think is really important is that, some of us are still like quarantined to some degree, even though it looks like Florida is completely wide open right now. But WEOP has been very intentional about selecting a platform that will give us the opportunity to actually network with all of the other women who are on this platform. So take advantage of the opportunity to network. Make sure you complete your profiles, look at some of the features. I've played a few games already. I think it was an icebreaker that asked me to select what fruit I would be. And I selected very fast, but if you go on, you'll see I'm a tangerine and maybe a couple of reasons as to why. So have a little bit of fun, you guys, and let's make sure we use this WUVA platform in order to connect effectively with people. A couple of housekeeping rules here. You can actually win prizes for your engagement. So have some fun here. Uh-oh, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me, Antoinette?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect.
You froze for a second, but you're fine now.
Okay, perfect. I just got a little thing that my internet was unstable for a second. So I'm back, you guys. But have a little bit of fun. And the housekeeping is that there are prizes. And I just want to call out one of our sponsors just to give a special recognition. And there's many sponsors who are making, who have contributed and are a part of making today happen. But Anissa International will be giving us a few goodies for today. And if you don't love beauty, like you're going to leave this session and love beauty because she has some great prizes for us. And I'm really excited about that. The goal for today, you guys, again, is to connect, to engage, and it's definitely to network among this amazing group of women and to hear from these amazing speakers who will inspire us and give us some nuggets to drive our businesses forward. If this is your first WEOP event, hopefully it will not be your last. So welcome. And as you will see, WEOP is really dedicated to ensuring that they are growing and building entrepreneurs. WEOP is a membership organization. And what's important is that your involvement with this organization does not have to stop with this session. It can continue as we move forward. So there's an online portal. It's all about WEOP Women. We'll continue to give you information about how you can stay involved with the organization and become a member if you're not a member already. So before we get started, I think I gave some of the housekeeping rules. We'll continue to provide some, but really get into your WUVA. I've downloaded it. I'm on my computer, but I downloaded it on the phone and I'm having a little bit of fun keeping up with the chat here. But before we get started, I really wanted to introduce the people who have made this happen, and really one person who's instrumental, and it is Antoinette Ball. She is the co-founder and the CEO of the Women's Entrepreneurial Opportunity Project. And I have to read this sometimes, you guys, but I know it by heart. We call it WEOP, but it literally is just a long word. And what I'm so proud about this organization is that they started in 1999. They quickly started doing and celebrating Women's History Month, and we're sitting at the 20th celebration that they have actually executed. So, wow, the commitment over time is amazing. But Miss Ball, along with her twin sister, Antoinette Ball, actually have dedicated their energy to providing programs, services, and support to women like me and you. And they've also encouraged and they celebrate the economic self-sufficiency of women. And I can't say that enough and how important that is. So, Antoinette, I want to thank you for your leadership, for your support, and I really would love to turn it over to you. And thank you for making this amazing day happen.
Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? All the beautiful faces that I can see. First and foremost, I'm excited about celebrating Women's History Month this month. And I want to begin by thanking all of our sponsors, because without sponsors, we could not make things happen. So I want to say thank you to Georgia Power, to ADP, to Truist Bank, and also to Anissa International. Sponsors support the great things that we do within our community. So we cannot live without you. So thank you so much. Also, I want to extend a thank you to all the phenomenal women that are around me, making amazing things happen. I would like to thank all the ladies on the planning committee. Let me thank Tracy Ridley, Donna Curry, Pamela Bivens, Betty Davis, our volunteers today, Marquila Taylor, Montez Diamond, and Terry Gleaton. And I hope I don't forget anyone. Also, thank you for Ashley Pop, who's been our technical producer now for almost 3 or 4 years, for making all this magic happen behind the scenes. Thank you, WEOP team. And of course, all of our speakers for taking time from your busy schedules to say, yes, I want to speak to the women at WEOP and share my wisdom and knowledge. So I want to just thank all of you guys, because it takes a village to make things happen. We have a lot to celebrate today. I don't know if you know that WEOP received a resolution from the Georgia House of Representatives proclaiming March 24th, 2021 as Women-Owned Small Business Day at the state capitol to support the work of WEOP and observe, celebrate, and commend small businesses for creating jobs and boosting the local economy. And special thanks to Kim Schofield, the state representative, for making this resolution happen. So we are so excited. If you're not familiar with WEOP, we are a nonprofit Atlanta-based organization launched in 1999 with over 20 years of experience, like Yolanda stated. Over the last 2 decades, we've touched thousands of women through our programming and special initiatives. Organizations like WEOP, and not trying to tout, but we play a vital role in building an ecosystem that supports business growth and economic opportunities for women. So it's very important. And I also encourage other women who are motivated by their self-passions to start organizations and support our communities. The theme for this year is Reimagine 2021. It helps us learn from our past and prepare for our future. None of us anticipated the pandemic. So we really have to think about what's going on. So this was a year of unexpected challenges that we did not anticipate. As we reimagine our future, we have to take into account the rippling negative impact for minorities and women-owned businesses caused by the pandemic. Analysts predict, and I don't know if you know that the pandemic could wipe out 10 years of small businesses. Our future is going to depend upon the actions that we take today. We have to be strategic, collectively support each other, and continue to build economic power within our own communities and within our own businesses. Remember, the conversations that we have today are going to continue throughout the year. With all that we do as an organization, we thank you for joining our celebration today and hope that you will leave this with the contact, with some wisdom, and with some information. So again, I'm excited about today. We have a lot to celebrate. And I just want to thank all you guys for joining us, because we cannot do this alone. Speaking of dynamic women, I'm happy to begin the discussion with one of our board members, Tiffany Glenn. She has been a strong supporter of WEOP, and the board provides the leadership that we need to make things happen within our communities. Tiffany Glenn is the Vice President of Human Resources, ADP. She has a 15-year long career in human resources, and expertise in areas like talent and performance acceleration, organizational design, associate relations, business processes improvement, diversity and inclusion, change leadership, and learning management. In her current career role, she provides strategic HR support to over 3,000 leaders across the state. She is a member of ADP's board for women in leadership, and also she's a proud member of WEOP's board. So Tiffany, thanks for all that you do. And I'm going to let you begin this discussion. And thank you for all your support.
Appreciate it, Antoinette. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here on this Wednesday morning, joining you live from my home office. I can't even imagine that it's been a year that I've been in this home office. I miss my ADP office in Alpharetta, but very hopeful in the coming months I'll have the opportunity to go back and see the lovely faces of many of my peers and colleagues. So I'm excited to kick off this session with you, talking a little bit about resiliency. And thinking about resiliency, we're going to talk about it in the brief minutes that I have, not only from a personal standpoint, but also a professional standpoint. And I know that we're here talking to a lot of women that either work in corporate America, work for nonprofits, or many entrepreneurs that have their own businesses, and resiliency crosses all of those different lanes. So we hear the term resiliency used in so many different ways, leveraged in so many different ways. But when I think about resiliency for me, what it actually means is, when something actually happens, how do you go about the bounce back when you're faced with obstacles and challenges? And I think we can all relate to challenges that have come our way, some expected, some unexpected. And essentially, how do we strive and move forward when that actually happens? And as I mentioned, it happens every single day to us. Some of those challenges are smaller than others. Some of them are larger. And so what I want to spend some time with you today is just talking about high level, what some of those things are, and also how do we plan to continue to build on improving being resilient. So when you think about business owners, I think that all of you can relate to this. Have you ever ran out of money? Have you ever experienced your business model failing? Have you ever watched your competition strive? I think many of you probably are out there raising your hands and probably shouting that you've all been in that place, but I'm glad that you're all here and it seems like that you have come out of that place. One of the things that I would say is it becomes when those things happen, how do you really respond and how do you really rebound? And one of the things that you need to continue to do is really to determine your readiness and your level of resiliency. And what I mean by readiness is because we know these things are going to happen. No business is perfect. No person is perfect. No product is perfect. And so challenges and obstacles are going to come. And so how do you do a better job of planning and practicing of being resilient? While you can't always plan, one of the things that I would suggest, and one of the things that I do even with the corporate career that I have every single day, is I take the opportunity to do what I call an after action review. And what an after action review is really all about is when something happens. So let's just use, for example, and I'll use in my world of human resources, crisis happened and a pandemic happened. COVID-19, if you would have asked me 2 years ago that COVID-19 was coming and was going to shut the world down the way that it did, that it was going to impact the lives of many that we love, it was going to impact the business that we do every single day, I would have bet you that that was not going to actually happen, but it did. And I had my opportunity as an HR leader to learn how to lead, how to adapt, and how to be resilient in the midst of a pandemic. As you can imagine, our business model was impacted within our organization. We weren't winning the same way that we were winning previously. We had associates who were experiencing COVID-19, who were experiencing deaths within their families. We had people who needed to go home. Their kids were out of school, and so many challenges that came our way. And what did we do to navigate and to be resilient through those times? And so one of the things that I would suggest you do, and you heard me say the words after action review. is take the moment when those challenges do come your way to take a step back to say, what just happened? What went well? What were the opportunities or the things that I didn't expect? What can I do differently in the future? Were there any themes and trends that happened with this particular challenge that I've seen happen before? And are there things that I can do to prevent or at least to alleviate some of the things that I experience in the midst of this challenge? And while you do that, sometimes it's really hard to see how you're going to get past it. I will tell you, when we look at what happened in our organization from a pandemic perspective and really evaluate and ask ourselves those questions, there were definitely things that we can do. And I'll give you an example of what resilience can actually look like for a business in this scenario. And one of the organizations that I actually support, we have a business model. We have the product and tools that we have offered for years and years and years. And we haven't deviated from that model at all because we've been successful. But what I can tell you is that resilience is about taking risks. It's about courage. And what are we doing right now? We're exploring different business models. We're looking at different products. We're looking at different verticals that we haven't played in before. But guess what? There are things that are important to the market. There are things that are important to our clients. And so that for us can be a win. It may be deviating from where you started, but essentially it also contributes to the long-term success of your organization. The other thing that I would actually say is, after you ask yourself those questions, those after action reviews continue to be important. I would encourage you to continue to do those, not only from a professional standpoint, but as well as in your personal life. And I want to share with you, because while I talked a little bit about business, I want to share with you something that I experienced and I was responsible for being courageous and resilient. And while I talked a little bit about when you do those after action plan reviews, it helps you to plan and prepare for the future. Sometimes you may not have the moment to actually plan and prepare. So not too long ago, I had the opportunity to, just like I am today, coming from my office, speak at a conference, and a conference where I was talking about harassment and bullying. And in the midst of that conference, the Zoom meeting was actually hacked. And a number of males entered that meeting, and many of myself, as well as the other panelists, which were from different backgrounds, me as a Black woman, many of my counterparts who were Asian women, experienced what bullying would look like in a cyber world. And what happened is that we were called names that were very inappropriate. There were images that were flashed on the screen. And as you can imagine, we didn't plan. We didn't anticipate that. Only thing we did is really prepare to come and have a dialogue with many people around bullying and harassment and what we can do to continue to drive change. And in that moment, as you can imagine, so many nerves happen, so many emotions happen, and we had options of what to do. After the great tech people kicked all of those ignorant people out of the Zoom, we had a decision to make. Do we keep going? Do we halt and stop? What do we do? And in that moment, I didn't even know coming into that meeting, resilience would have to come into play. Myself, as well as my panelists, continued the dialogue. We talked about what just happened. We fielded questions. We supported each other. And you would have never, ever known that such a terrible attack on such a topic that we were all passionate about would have happened on the midst of that day. When I replay that day, I would have never, ever thought that would have actually happened. And so I share that with you, not to tell you about what Tiffany has experienced, not to tell you around what Tiffany had to undergo and the emotions that she felt in that moment. I tell you that is that sometimes you don't plan for resiliency. Sometimes you don't plan for the challenges and obstacles that will actually come your way. But if I can leave you with anything as it relates to resiliency, I will say practice every day and stay ready for when you will be able to use being resilient. So thank you so much for affording me the opportunity just to share a few words with you. I know that we have a jam-packed agenda, and I want to make sure you have the opportunity to really hear from some other dynamic speakers. So with that being said, I am going to now introduce to you our next speaker, Sukredi Chata, who is the product manager for mobile apps and accessibility at Spotify, a company that we're all familiar with. She oversees company-wide accessibility efforts for Spotify, leading the company's efforts to create a scalable mobile infrastructure that ships quickly and reliable to over 300 million users. She serves as an invited expert advising the W3C, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Working Group, and Mobile Accessibility Task Force, which set industry standards and digital accessibility standards. Prior to her current role, she was a senior product manager at Yahoo Finance, where she led cross-platform integration with brokers to support trading and created a new user segment with 5 times greater engagement and the 3 times greater monetization. She holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Princeton University. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Sukriti, who will bring to you Power Up Your Business with Inclusive Digitization. Sukriti, welcome.
Thank you, Tiffany. That was such an amazing session to follow. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do justice to it, but I'll try. Good morning and welcome, everyone. It's so great and so amazing to be in the company of women entrepreneurs and business owners. Thank you, Antoinette and WEOP for having me. As Tiffany introduced myself, I'll just add a little bit more color to my past experience. I grew up in New Delhi, India, and moved to the US about 10 years ago. And I'm currently a product manager at Spotify and work on accessibility in mobile apps, which means making products more accessible for people with disabilities. Before this, I was at Yahoo, where I led the Women's Inclusion Network chapter at my office. Talking about this part of the program, which is called Power Up Your Business with Inclusive Digitization, is a really important one, especially considering the circumstances we're in at the moment. This last year has brought unprecedented challenges for all of us, and especially for small businesses, and more so for women. According to a survey in February earlier this year, it's 5.4 million women have lost jobs versus 4.4 million men. So women have lost disproportionately more jobs and employment than their male counterparts, further highlighting the importance of increased representation and of self-employment. It has been a time for rethinking and remodeling for big businesses and for small businesses alike, using this moment as an opportunity to transform our businesses and rethinking our models by automating parts of what are not core to our businesses and digitizing aspects of our work that can add efficiencies and can outlive the pandemic and use the pandemic as sort of a catalyst for change instead of thinking of it as purely a challenge. As part of this change, there are a few key things to consider, depending on the nature of the business, of course, that aren't just necessities, but can actually be a competitive advantage for the business. The first one of this is ways of working, or how we deal with hiring and maintaining a workforce that is productive. The first one of which is where do you hire from and how do you consider distributed teams? First, do you need to consider enabling people working from home or remotely? And if so, that has cascading decisions, including how do you do product management or project management, adding accountability and information sharing across in-person and online interactions, especially if it's a hybrid model. How do you make sure that the team members that aren't in person or at the office get the same sort of relatability with the business and with the owners as people who are working remotely? From an opportunity standpoint, it adds the possibility of tapping into a more diverse, distributed workforce, which in some cases can even be economically more feasible. The second one is customer engagement. Customer journeys and expectations have dramatically changed over the past year as people are expecting more and more interactions to happen either on the phone or online. And the way to keep up with these changing expectations is to be proactive and look for opportunities by engaging with your customers who maybe were in person and now not so much, and figuring out whether they would like to be communicated with via email or phone or other channels that are not in person. Remote services also enable us to reach a newer customer base that maybe we weren't considering before because of location constraints. A really good example of this is restaurants that didn't deliver at first, and during the pandemic, they had no option but to deliver, and as a result, had to figure out how to partner with delivery apps and make a sustainable model where they're able to keep up with the demand and figure out how to balance the two aspects. If the business relied on foot traffic, the other thing to consider is when we move online, and the first step of which is to have an online presence. And this means social media, your Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat accounts, what have you. But also maybe considering having a website, whether that makes sense, whether people can find you if they look for your type of business on Google Maps, or and this in the field of product management for consumer apps is known as reaching the user where they are. So thinking about what your user's journey looks like when in their life cycle, or when during their day or month or week or whatever cadence they'll use your product at, will they look for it? And when they look for it, are they able to find you? And that's called search engine optimization as one of the techniques to deal with it. And that means using the correct terms and being searchable, essentially, when people look for your type of business or something adjacent to it. Online ads is another completely different domain. And the good thing about this pandemic is that you don't need to know every single aspect of how to do these things. There are software partners and that range from free trials to all the way to fully built SaaS products. And you have a range to pick from as a result of the pandemic, because as entrepreneurs, when you are thinking about remodeling and adapting your business, there are businesses outside that are thinking about how to best help you. And that means there's a ton of choice out there to pick from vendors and focus on the core of your business, which is serving your customers to the best of your ability. When we make these changes, I'll get to the inclusion aspect now. A key factor to consider is accessibility, which is making sure that the services and support your businesses provide can be used by all. This includes permanent and temporary disabilities. Some examples of this are people with visual impairment, people with cognitive impairment, people with speech or hearing impairment. So making sure your services, especially if they're online, are available in different modalities. Now, what that means is if someone can't see, make sure that the website is at least accessible by a screen reader. Same thing, if you only have phone support, someone with a hearing impairment will probably not be able to reach you with it. So making sure there's a text alternative. And that doesn't necessarily only apply to people with disabilities. Once you give people multiple options to engage with you, it actually opens up a lot more doors. So it's not going to be just people with hearing impairment that might want to text. It might be people with anxiety or people who just don't like talking over the phone to be able to engage with your business over text or email. So those are some of the interesting things to think about as you're thinking about digitizing your business. Personally, I got interested in the field, and this is coming back to the point Tiffany raised about resiliency before, is when an adversity happens, how do you deal with it? And how do you move forward from it? So a few years ago, my dad lost vision in one of his eyes. And that's when I started thinking about how people with visual impairment use everyday products. And at the time I was working as an engineer at Yahoo Finance. And one of the key parts of the application are financial charts, which are by definition very visual and not accessible to people who are either blind or have partial vision. And one of the things that or solutions that I built was to use music and haptics to convert that digital information into tones that correspond with the moving data. And that way people who are blind and those we tested with were able to draw the entire pattern, which is hundreds of data points, within a similar time frame as a sighted user would, which previously wasn't possible. And that opened doors to a whole other set of use cases, including Alexa or voice assistants, where you can access data without having to see it.
Shop for system?
That's my Alexa talking in the background. So accessibility is not just the right thing to
Are
do.
you trying to shop for systems?
Alexa, stop. It's not just the right thing to do. It's one that makes great business sense. 1 billion people, which is about 1 in 5 people in the world, have some form of disability. And if you're not considering that when you're digitizing your business, you're missing out on a huge opportunity, which is 15% of the world's population to begin with. This becomes even more important if your business is dealing in the public sector, serving schools or hospitals or governments. It's a competitive advantage also because it's often an overlooked aspect of digital product development. The last part that I'll touch upon is guardrails, which is when you do move your business online, what are some of the things or blind spots that you need to consider? One of them, and the most important one, is data security, especially if you're collecting information from your customers, making sure that that data is secure and you have the right tools in place in case something goes wrong. And picking vendors that have a good reputation and have been vetted by other entrepreneurs or that you trust. And there are pros and cons of picking management software and scaling them depending on what stage of the business you're at. And this includes things like payroll, account management, what you're doing for distribution in case you're in the business of physical goods, how you handle payments online, and shipping. Customer service is another really important aspect of it when you don't have a physical store or aren't able to reach customers in person. So all of these processes and shifts, even though caused by the pandemic, as you can see, can be a huge catalyst in not just cost savings and adding efficiencies to existing models, but also to collect and look at data of how your customers are engaging with your products at scale, and as a result, making better decisions to move your business forward. So the term technology, transformation, or digitization can sound very intimidating at first. In essence, what it is figuring out what parts of your business processes can you move online. And that doesn't mean using expensive out-of-the-box SaaS solutions and paying thousands of dollars a month for it. It can be as simple as moving your in-person meetings to Zoom, that's digitization, or getting a trial version of a payroll software so you can focus on the core of your business and figuring out how to best serve your customers without paying attention or paying too much attention to administrative overhead or things you don't necessarily have to do. So to use this as an opportunity, and that's kind of a mindset shift versus a challenge that the pandemic has kind of forced us to think about. I'll leave some time for questions in the chat if there are any. If not, we'll move back to Tiffany.
Thank you, Sukriti. That was amazing. And I have an appreciation for you identifying that sometimes digitization and automation seems, like you have to do these expensive, kind of solutions, so to speak, but you gave us some examples of some simple things that, we can do within the various businesses to really create efficiencies. And the other thing that you talked a little bit about resilience, even in your sector, your segment as well, but even talked about like with the pandemic hitting, what are some different things that you can do to continue to make your business more efficient? And so thank you so much for the acknowledgement of, ways that we can think about consumers that are, experience hearing, impaired, disabilities, right? We don't necessarily always think about that, right? And we need to think about our consumers from a holistic standpoint. And so I hope that everyone out there is taking notes of how you can use some of this valuable information to continue to have an impact on your business. Thank you again, Sukriti.
Thank you.
With that being said, I am going to introduce our next speaker, Tamika Stafford, who works for Truist Bank. In her role as the Community Business Development Officer, she supports small businesses by demystifying how to access capital through traditional banks or alternative sources. She frequently facilitates financial wellness seminars, advising people on business credit, borrowing, and access to capital and collaborations with a number of different organizations. She is also a member of the BB&T Corporate Women's Information Network, and has co-chaired the group's Atlanta chapter since 2015. Most recently, she was appointed chair of the Corporate Advisory Board for the Atlanta Black chamber. With that being said, I'm excited to introduce Tamika and hear a little bit about her topic, as you can see on the screen, the imposter syndrome, know your worth. Thank you, Tamika.
Fantastic. No, thank you, Tiffany, and thank you, Sukriti. This was excellent information that we're sharing today. Welcome to WEOP's Business Summit in celebration of Women's History Month. As Tiffany mentioned, my name is Tamika Stafford, and I work for Truist Bank as a Community Business Development Officer here in Atlanta, and I am honored to be with you today. Today, we're going to talk about knowing your worth. Now, did you know, for instance, that today is Equal Pay Day in the United States? That's what people associate with worth. They think in terms of money. Pay disparity is nothing new to us, but this particular segment isn't about the gender pay gap. There's a session later in the day that's going to address that, so stick around for that. For this particular segment, we're in knowing your worth. We're going to go introspective here. We're going to focus on the mindset, the thought process. Lean In, a research group that's dedicated to helping women achieve their ambitions and work toward an equal world, they stated that Black women are significantly underrepresented at all levels of management. Compared with women of other races and ethnicities, Black women face more systemic barriers, receive less support from managers, and experience more acute discrimination. That same report indicates that the results have been the same for 6 years, likely since they began their research. While we don't need a research group to validate our experience, this study actually helps those outside of the community to see this data just cannot be refuted. Today, we're going to touch on microaggressions, which some researchers believe
Hi, so it seems that we've lost Tamika. If you'll give us just one moment, we'll try to get her back. In the meantime, Tiffany, did you want to come on, or Antoinette, until we're able to get Tamika back for the last few minutes?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ashley. We apologize for the inconvenience. We probably just had a quick technical difficulty. As you can imagine, that happens in this environment. I would encourage you, if there are questions that you have out there that you do want answered, to make sure that you put them out in the Q&A. We are happy to answer any of those questions. One of the things that I would just say is, you think about everything that we're hearing thus far. We continue to talk about all of the things that we've experienced over the past year, how we've leveraged from a courage standpoint, from a resiliency standpoint. You've already have some ideas around how you can continue to probably walk away and think about some of your business models and things that you can actually do, differently. And this is what this is all about. I hope that you are not only taking all of the insights that are coming your way, that you're spending time also to connect and network with some of the other attendees that are actually out there. So Antoinette, I don't know if you have any other words while we wait for Tamika to get back on, but I did want to just highlight some of the opportunities that are right here ahead of you, and I hope that you are taking advantage of them.
And I was just thinking about Sukriti's presentation about digitization, and it's so important because the technology plays such a major role. When it goes out, it goes out. Mm-hmm. And But there was a question in the chat. It said about digitizing and automating business aspects is important, but it can seem tough. So that was one of the questions in the chat that maybe Sukriti can kind of respond to that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
I absolutely 100% agree with that assessment. Tamika's back, I think, but I'll quickly answer before leaving. It can seem intimidating, but think of it as a large problem that's broken down into smaller pieces and figuring out each step of the process one by one, instead of thinking about, oh my God, how do I digitize my entire business? Because that's the easiest way to get bogged down into the impossibility of it. But once you're able to pick one problem, for example, let's say, okay, how do I move from a in-person store, for example, to a delivery model? That is as simple as creating an Amazon account and letting them handle the shipping. And that's an example of how you think about it. And then move from there to how to deal with employees versus customers versus figuring out an online model for your customer service. And that's how I would think about it.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
That's
Tamika.
awesome, Sukriti. Tamika, you're back, so we'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. And I do apologize about that. That's part of that resiliency that Tiffany talked about earlier, right? When the unexpected happens and there's nothing you can do about that. So we're going to go ahead and move right along. Thank you very much for pinch hitting in there, Sukriti. But we were talking about the research that happens when there is the intersectionality layered in with the fact that we're women and how that impacts us. And those microaggressions, while they may be viewed as insignificant when they're isolated incidents, but when they occur day after day, as they often do, it builds up and takes a toll. And what happens is these intentional or unintentional insults and invalidations signal disrespect, and you feel it. And it's hard for anybody to bring their best self to work as a business owner when they're often underestimated, slighted, and feel devalued. That negative self-talk is crippling, and it can actually inhibit us from sales and business and career opportunities. And we're not alone. Maya Angelou, Albert Einstein, Kate Winslet, Michelle Obama, and Emma Watson have all experienced it. In fact, experts estimate that 70% of the population have experienced it. So what exactly is it? Imposter syndrome is defined, as you can see here, as the feeling of severe inadequacy, self-doubt that can leave people fearing that they will be exposed as a fraud. Now, the Harvard Business Review recently released an article about imposter syndrome, but they focused more so on the systemic gender and racial bias as the root cause of feelings of inadequacy. And once that goes away, the problem is solved. That's partially true. You cannot control what other people think, say, or do, but you can control your thinking and how you respond to situations. And that's what we're focusing on today. Matters you can control. So when we feel self-doubt and self-criticism, thinking we're not good enough, that's what causes us to feel out of place. When you have pervasive racist and sexist stereotypes that exacerbate the issue, such as messaging like other groups are more effective in leadership positions, or women aren't good leaders because they're too emotional, or women aren't good at math or science, or people of color are lazy, unintelligent, or lack integrity, for example. The BBC stated that women are more likely to experience imposter syndrome if we don't see many examples of people who look like us or share our background that are clearly succeeding in our field. So what do? We overcompensate to prove them wrong. We're perfectionists, even in matters that don't require that level of detail. And what that does is it adds to our stress levels. We can't accept compliments, and we'll practically try to convince the compliment giver why we don't deserve it. We may even find ourselves trying to imitate the leaders we do see that don't share our background, only to be later perceived as inauthentic. We're overwhelmed, we're stressed, and in many ways paralyzed. We won't reach out for better opportunities, and if we're managers, it may even affect make us ineffective, right? Because we may micromanage. We lack confidence, and we're perfectionists. But it doesn't stop there. The professional dysfunction spills over into our day-to-day mental health. That constant pressure is affecting us physically. Now we can't sleep. We have anxiety. We're stressed. We can't focus. We have eating disorders, unhealthy behaviors, and coping mechanisms. So what do? Are we destined to be a victim to this estimation others have of us? Or worse yet, our own negative thinking? Absolutely not. And we're going to talk about ways to overcome this vicious cycle. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to move quickly through these. But I do encourage you to take a screenshot of these, and you're welcome to follow up with me afterwards to talk about some solutions. List your qualifications to make sure you know exactly what you do. Sometimes you forget how good you really are. What evidence exists that you're less qualified than someone else? Internalize your triumphs, where you'll always pass failure on your way to success. Learn to view successes as blessings and failures as lessons. Talk about it, right? We know that if there may be many people experiencing the same things you are, but if you don't share, you don't know. And just one quick thing I want to plug in here as far as a public service announcement, we need to normalize addressing mental health concerns and the power of talking things out. You can't pray everything away. It doesn't mean you're weak. We're all going through a pandemic. Nobody is okay, right? You'll be surprised at how much clarity you gain by talking with someone, and a trained therapist can potentially help. Flip the script again, that self-talk narrative, change that. Stop comparing yourself. Comparison is the thief of joy. So there are people that are more talented in some areas, yes, but so are you. Acknowledge your own uniqueness and special contributions. I love this one here. Reviewing your accomplishments regularly. Keep a journal of logging all the great things you do and how wonderful you are. It'll help you gain confidence, especially on those days when you're feeling down and you're your own worst critic. Stop focusing on perfectionism. Recognize the fruits of your hard work. Develop a reward system for yourself and give yourself some grace, the same grace you give to others. Lastly, acknowledge that your emotions don't define you or your success. Feeling like an imposter has more to do with what you feel and less to do with what you've done. And just because you think it doesn't mean you have to believe it. So those are some 8 points that you can use to help control your thinking, since we can't control our environment. If you don't see your own worth, then how on earth do you expect others to see it and compensate you accordingly? Don't devalue yourself, and don't let others do it. You're capable, you're competent, you're worthy, and you are enough. Never let anyone tell you that you're not. Last slide is just some resources that may help you feel empowered, inspired, and network with other women as you grow on your journey. And make sure you pay it forward and share the wisdoms and insights that you learned with other women, just like someone took the time to pour into you. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Apologies for the disruption, but it wouldn't be technology if we didn't have disruptions. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to turn it back over to Tiffany.
Thank you so much, Tamika. So many words that you said in those few short minutes, but if I could just summarize a couple of things that you actually identified, is just really just reminding yourself of your worth, right? Taking a step back and thinking about your accomplishments and thinking about who you are and how great you actually are. Another thing that you said is you can't control what other people think or do. And one of my favorite quotes is, what other people think or do is none of my business. And so we need to mind our own business. And so minding our own business is really about focusing on us, what we're great at. Now, don't forget about being self-aware, because you do have to be self-aware. But I would just say that you can't control everyone else. You can control yourself. So thank you again, Tamika, for leaving us with that. Thank you again, Sukriti, for the message that you brought during this session. I want to be mindful and make sure that we have an opportunity to give you all a break. So right now we're at about 10:19 Eastern Standard Time. We are going to come back right at 10:30 for the next session that will be focused on reimagining supplier diversity. So take your bio break, refill your coffee, refill your drink, and come back and see us in about 11 minutes. Thanks again, everyone.